Rule by Secrecy, and in Rule by Secrecy, you'll find the occult traced in various forms throughout the history of Western civilization, and some cases Eastern civilization as well. But in tracing the history of secret societies, Jim Marrs weaves that thread through Nazi Germany as well. We've been exploring it for the last couple of hours on Coast to Coast AM. The rise of Nazi occultism and secret societies in the formation of the Third Reich. And before you came on, Jim, I had taken a couple of callers who had said that they were also students of this, and one posed a question that you referenced last hour, and I kind of want to get to it quickly. He had mentioned Rudolf Steiner as well, and said that wanted to know about homeopathic experiments and other things which he had done, which happened in concentration camps. Do you know much about that sort of thing?
Well, Steiner, of course, pretty much predated the Nazis, but he helped lay some of the philosophical groundwork. There is some known about that. Some of that stuff's still secret because under Operation Paperclip, we brought some of those Nazis over here to this country and put them to work working on mind control and various other things back in the 50s and early 60s. But there was a thread going through all of those secret societies that had to do, again, bringing in theosophy, Eastern religion, mysticism. They were, occultism was really big around the turn of the century, late 1800s. Arthur Conan Doyle got involved in that, and a lot of the society people in England, seances was a big thing. We tend to think that a lot of this New Age stuff is New Age, that it's new. Actually, it's really not. A lot of that was being practiced and was being contemplated by very thoughtful and educated people back into the 1800s, and a lot of those people got caught up in the occultism of Nazism.
Let's pick up several callers here who are waiting to go on across the country and across the world with Jim Marrs, author of Rule by Secrecy. And let's start with Mary on the wildcard line in Sacramento, California for Jim Marrs. Mary?
Good evening, gentlemen. I had a couple of questions, if you bear with me. One of them is, I think, very important to our country. Did he not, Hitler, confiscate the guns from the citizens before he did all that he did, and make them fear him to where, in some I'm sure many agreed with him in that insane philosophy, but did not a lot of them do what they did out of fear?
Yes, they did, and I'm glad you brought up the gun confiscation. If you were to read, I wished I had it here at hand, if you were to read the speech made by Hitler, it seems like it was about in the mid-30s, when they passed the laws and they registered all guns, and then eventually led to gun confiscation. And this has been the methodology of every dictator that's come along the world. One of the first things they do, in recent times particularly, is the first thing they do is take up all the guns so nobody can oppose them.
Absolute power.
This is exactly why our founders of this country put the Second Amendment. The First Amendment's free speech. The Second Amendment was the right to bear arms, because if we ever give up our guns, we're dead ducks.
We're not equal, are we?
We're not equal, no.
The other thing was, did he not also kill, I think, more Christians than he did even Jews? No, okay, that's something I heard.
No, that's not true. That's not true. However, he didn't draw the line at killing Christians.
Yeah,
there were Christians that died, but they were trade unionists, they were gays, they were intellectuals. Anybody who might have given him or his regime some trouble certainly went to the camps too. But it's not true that more Christians were killed.
Okay.
Not in the sense, Mary, that they were targeted for death. I mean, certainly, I think we can all say systematically,
right.
The Jews were eliminated, but were attempted to be eliminated. But there was along the way, certainly, in terms of civilian populations, and I mean, it wasn't. I mean, it was war, and war.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to establish, that he may have began with that, but ended up killing anyone who opposed, his philosophy in any way, which makes that great danger in being disarmed, twice as bad.
Exactly. The Reverend Martin Niemöller, I'm going to have to paraphrase him here, but he pretty well summed it up. He said they came for the Jews, but he wasn't a Jew, so he didn't really say anything. And they came for the trade unionists, but he wasn't a trade unionist, so he didn't say anything. So they came for the, somebody else, some other group. He didn't say anything. And then when they came for him, there was nobody he could call on for help.
Well, I shortened that, and I wish somebody would make a bumper sticker out of it. It's number 1, Hitler took the guns. Number 2, he took the Jews, and number 3, he took you and me.
That was about it.
Well,
can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Was there a great difference between socialism and wasn't Nazism about as close to socialism as you can get?
Well, Nazism, as I said early in the program, stands for National Socialist German Workers' Party. It was a socialist movement. In fact, what's really ironic is that a lot of the Western financiers and manufacturers and industrialists supported Hitler because they saw in his brand, they knew that his brand of socialism was a nationalist brand. It was strictly confined to Germany. They were fearful of Russian communism because communism was, they were going, workers of the world unite. They were trying to export communism to all of the other countries. So they backed Hitler as a bloc against Eastern communism, and then in the end they had to turn around and fight him because it was a Frankenstein monster that had gotten out of control.
And that's interesting to point out because actually Hitler's socialism was much closer to the socialism of England or the socialism of the Netherlands. Is a very mild form of socialism where, in a way, socialism represents much more the nationalizing of industry as opposed to complete government control in one's life.
You're right, but here's what's fascinating to me is that when you go back and you study the outline for world control presented in the bogus protocols of the Elders of Zion, which apparently came from much older documentation than that, such as the Illuminati, and you look at their planks, you look at their platform, and you compare that with the Communist Manifesto, and you find out that it all pretty much reads the same. The socialist philosophy is pretty much the same. They want abolition of private property. They want a graduated income tax, abolition of all inheritance. They want a monopolistic central bank with state capital. They want the centralization of all communication and transport. They want state control over families, factories and farm production, and they want state ownership of all capital. They also want to combine agriculture and manufacture and have all that, and they want free education to all children so that they can indoctrinate them with their philosophies. And again, this is something that we need to be aware of because if you think about it, there's people pushing for that very thing in this country today.
It's the numbers we'll get to again coming up here if you want to hang on. Your chance to talk with Jim Marrs, our final hour with Jim Marrs. The book is Ruled by Secrecy. In this case, we're kind of exploring the occult roots of Nazi Germany. We'll get back to questions in that vein on the way on Coast to Coast AM. My name's Ian Punnett. Manteca, California on Coast to Coast AM. Am I pronouncing that right, Randall?
Perfect. Manteca. Yeah, that's it.
And your question for Jim Marrs?
I had an interesting fact about the use of the swastika. There was a high school in New Mexico that adopted the Hopi Indian symbol for life and for the sun, which was a swastika. Was to them, it was a symbol of benevolence and they put a positive cast on it. But this high school picked up that symbol back in the 20s, and they had used this as their school symbol, and they had it on their football helmets and on their jerseys. And all during the war years, they didn't give up the symbol. They kept it and would just tell everybody that it was a symbol for life and had nothing to do with the Nazi Party. But they continued wearing this symbol as a high school symbol all the way up until 1954. And this is reported in Parade magazine in 75 or 76.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Or do you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that's an interesting story, and I'll give you one that's parallel to that. I have in my possession a patch that was pre-World War II, and it was for a unit in the United States Army that was, as I recall, predominantly from Oklahoma, so it had a close Indian heritage, and it's a green patch that went on the sleeve with a red swastika.
I'll be darned. It's amazing.
And I want to throw in one thought, too, that over the Shinto temples in Japan, you'll frequently see something that looks like a swastika. And I've heard it addressed before that it's one of the little touchstones between the Japanese people and the Germans, otherwise disparate groups that had nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Where when they became part of the Axis powers, they could see that symbol back and forth between their cultures, meaning something similar and positive, but both with their own interpretations. And you can still see it today over as you enter into Shinto temples.
And Ian, doesn't that prove that that the swastika was not just something new symbol dreamed up by Hitler, but evidences a symbology and a certain hidden knowledge and certain hidden philosophies that is worldwide and goes back for centuries.
Yeah, it's just such in this case, though, of course, it's just impossible, as this high school that you mentioned, Randall, was able to divorce it any longer from the evil that it came to represent. But you had another question, Randall?
Yeah, they dropped the symbol in 1954. But, I was wondering if Mr. Mars has heard of Dr. Anthony Sutton. He wrote a book called The Best Enemy Money Can Buy about Wall Street and U.S. investors and the rise of the Bolsheviks and the Soviet Union. And he also wrote a book called Wall Street and the Rise of the Nazi Party.
Yes.
And how a lot of the early funding and the rise to power of the Nazi Party would have been almost impossible without U.S. financiers backing them.
Yes, I'm very much aware of Anthony Sutton's book. That was one of the books that was one of the resources for my book, Rule by Secrecy, and I get into all of that. Who financed Hitler and who profited from Hitler? This is not within the scope of this program, but let me leave you with one intriguing thought. As late as 1944, there were German U-boats in the Caribbean that were being refueled by Standard Oil.
You're kidding. Oh, that's amazing.
And if you want to get into that, there's another really good book by a guy by the name of James Poole entitled Who Financed Hitler?
Thank you, Randall. Appreciate it. Have a good morning. John is in Vermont on Coast to Coast AM for Jim Mars.
Hello?
Hi, John.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I'm a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason, and I'm an ex-member of the Golden Dawn. And I spent some time with Israel Regarde, who was Aleister Crowley's secretary for 20 years.
You were?
No, I spent some time with Israel Regarde. He was Aleister Crowley's secretary.
I see. I'm sorry. I thought you said in Israel. Yeah, Israel Regarde, his secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, some information on a fuel group you might be interested in, sir.
Well, lay it on me.
Well, Mr. Regarde, who I spent time with, told me about this Book of Enoch, which explains these beings that came to Earth and made it with the human of the species, which also ties in with Genesis, the sons of God, finding the daughters of men.
Hello? Nephilim.
Yes. The fuel group, which was what Hitler was very interested in at the time, was they also indoctrinated the SS in black masses outside of, I can't think of the name of that. Anyway, have you ever come in contact with this Book of Enoch, which goes into, it's also noted in a book, The Morning of the Magicians. Have you heard that?
Well,
yeah, that was the one about Aleister Crowley and the Golden Dawn. Now, the Book of Enoch goes back much further than that, and I'm not that familiar with it, but I do know about it.
And thank you, John. Let me get to Alan in Memphis, Tennessee, for Jim Mars, author of Rule by Secrecy. Alan?
Hello.
Hello.
First of all, I was going to say that I dated a girl who was an Odinist for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And
making a big comeback, actually.
yeah, it is. But my question was, I was wondering if your guest had any information about the Process Church, which was supposedly a Nazi group that formed in America.
Well, there's been several bunch. Back when I was a young man, it was what was his name? George Lincoln Rockwell.
Right.
Yeah, remember him? And they had a neo-Nazi group then, and of course today we've got these skinheads, and they wear swastikas, and they, I'm not sure how much any of those groups, whether or not they actually delved into these philosophies that we're talking about that was behind Hitler, or whether they just went for the superficial, the symbols and the anti-Semitism and on like that.
Yeah,
I don't know. Ian, what do you think?
I think you bring up a great point, that the difference perhaps between American Nazism, one of the reasons why American Nazism not only never really took hold, but when as soon as Hitler's brand of Nazism was being rejected by this country, that George Lincoln Rockwell and his predecessors were completely sort of discredited and rejected by the country at large, is because of this the occult nature of Nazism in Germany was so lacking in the United States. It didn't translate. It didn't. There wasn't the need for this kind of mythology. We had our own myths. We have our own. We, as a people, we're united behind our cultural myths of the Wild West or of the
or George Washington's wooden teeth or something.
Right. Those are the things that bring us together in a way. And this other stuff was this weird importation that, especially because of its basis in hate, found its popularity very limited. But I think also to the idea that religiously we were in a very different place as a nation, and Germany was in a much more open to and were exploring this type of occultism long before it became popular here. It's another half hour that we have, and I hope we make the most of it with your great questions and comments. Continuing for Jim Mars, author of Rule by Secrecy, Gabriella in Hawaii. Am I pronouncing that right? Mother Gabriella?
Mother Gabrielle.
Or Gabrielle.
You got me mispronouncing my name. Mother Gabriella.
Okay, there it is.
Mr. Mars.
Yes.
2 questions. Number 1, I need a regular mailing address for you. We don't have a computer here in the Hermitage. And also, do you think that Hitler might have felt that England should have been a partner with him because of the Anglo-Israel idea?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by Anglo-Israel. You're talking about the Balfour...
The 10 lost tribes.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Yeah, that's part of it. The idea being that the lost tribes of Israel actually migrated in through Western Europe and on into Britain and actually formed what is now the modern nations of Britain and America.
Don't cut me off. I got one more question.
Okay, I'm not real sure if he was aware of all that or not. I think he just simply felt like that the British were close in race along with the Aryan race.
And a lot of the leaders obviously had been cousins already.
Right.
Look at Queen Victoria.
Keep in mind that the Windsors were from Germany originally and changed their name. So there were blood relations in England.
Not to and mention Prince Philip's ancestry as well,
right.
Who eventually marries the Queen, and he comes from a group not long separated from German aristocracy.
Right. So I'm not sure if he was aware or if he bought into the idea of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, but there certainly was he felt like there was a kinship of bloodlines and race there, and that's part of it too. The bloodlines figure into all of that. The bloodlines, of course, the idea of the Aryan superiority in the Aryan bloodline, but if you'll go back and look at it, all of those European royalties, and then going back to the Caesars, and then going back to the Pharaohs, they were all concerned with the bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
And your other question?
Are you aware of Armor Hammer's relationship to the Priory of Zion and to stuff dealing with Hitler?
Well, of course, Armand Hammer...
Is he still alive?
No.
No, he doesn't.
But Armand Hammer, of course, was very instrumental in our relationship with Russia, and to a certain extent extent with Germany. I have heard the stories that he was connected to the Priory of Sion, but I cannot confirm that.
Well, and I want to make, we talked about this the last time you were on. There's a difference between the mythical Priory of Zion, which gets, floated around in white supremacy circles as being, evidence of this great Zion conspiracy, and the Priory of Sion,
right,
which has Gallic roots. Is that where, from France?
Right. Yeah. Right. As far as I can tell, I'm not sure that there ever has been a Priory of Zion.
Right, that's it.
I think the question is over Sion. In fact, but to see, I'll tell you where that got started. Of course, was the false publication of what is called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion,
right.
And that was a earlier text that had been misreported and twisted for propaganda reasons by the Ocarina, the Tsar's police in the early part of the 20th century, to try to blame all the unrest that was going on in Russia on the Jews. And so they called it the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. But what's interesting is when you go back to the original documents that purport to be a plan to take over the world, you find that it really doesn't say Zion, it says Sion. And so it's been more closely tied to the mysterious Priory of Sion with an S, which does apparently have some historical roots, being founded back at the time of at about the same time the Knights Templars were being created over in Jerusalem at the time of the First Crusade. And, of course, has come forward and reportedly has had members not only in Europe but in North America that are among the more powerful people going.
Dale in Dallas, Coast to Coast AM for Jim Mars.
Yeah, good morning. I wanted to ask, I'm really intrigued by the origins of communism and Nazism, because you mentioned earlier that there is a connection, and you can just read the 10 planks and see that there are some pretty evil things about that.
Right.
Well, is it true? I'd heard that Karl Marx was Jewish.
Well, yeah, that's true. He was.
And what about Lenin and Trotsky?
I'm not sure about Lenin, but I think Trotsky was also Jewish. But again, you can't frame any kind of political philosophy on the ethnicity of the people involved.
Right. Well, I'm not talking about ethnicity. I'm really mainly talking about, I guess, philosophy. But I think in your book, did you not mention that Hitler and the Bolshevik Revolution got support from certain Western New York banking houses?
Oh, absolutely.
What was the ethnicity? What was the ethnicity of the owners of those banks?
Well, yes. Well,
I'm just trying to get to the facts. I'll be real blunt with you. I've studied World War I and World War II, and I came away with the idea that basically no one was good. That basically you had the Germans, the National Socialists, the Nazis were at war with the Zionist communists, and Russia was like the heart of that dragon. And Stalin was no good guy. He killed 30 million of his own people.
Oh, Hitler.
And Roosevelt was no saint. I mean, it's like you come away with studying the history of World War II, and nobody was a good guy.
I think you have a real good point there, and I would urge you to read my book, Rule by Secrecy, and I think you're going to find that what happened is that you have the same internationalists who were behind all of that. Okay.
Will you please comment on the Balfour Declaration, because I've also read a little bit about that. Is that really true? What that is about? That basically in World War I, the British and the Zionists had an agreement that if the Zionists in America mobilized America's support through the ownership of major newspapers to get America involved in World War I, that they would, or I guess in World War II, that they would then give Israel to the Zionists. Is that true?
That was the Balfour letter, which said, yes, if you'll aid us, we will support you in creating a state of Israel.
Well, couldn't that explain why the Germans had their? I mean, I don't think it was good what Hitler did, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. That the German sentiment was not it didn't happen by a vacuum.
Well,
I have a close friend at my church who is a Messianic Jew, and I don't really think we should dance around any issues. I think the Germans did some evil things. I think political Zionism has done some evil things, and I'm worried. I'm worried about the control that these groups may still have today.
And I think that's a legitimate. I think that's a legitimate concern. But again, I don't think it's. There is an inordinate number of Jews involved in the international banking community, international telecommunications, et cetera, but it is not, I'm sure you understand, not a Jewish plot.
Not totally,
okay?
right.
But in fact, let me just...
I'm worried about when you say not totally. Dale, I think you really do need to read the book, and I think it's important because...
What book?
Your book, Rule by Secrecy, because I think what Dale's flirting with here is the justifications of this idea of the world banking conspiracy or the world media conspiracy, and really I think I'm even worried about words like inordinate, because is what you're talking about in the book it makes it so clear that the people that worship money know no religion. I mean,
that's true.
I mean, the consortium of people that got together and sold out their own countries, sold out their own beliefs, sold out their own people to make a buck.
That's true.
Cuts across all denominational lines.
That's true. In fact, if you really study the Holocaust, you'll find out that it really it might not have even happened except for the collusion of members of the Jewish community. When they rounded everybody up, they were the Jewish leaders there telling them to go. When they were in the camps, it was the capos that were Jews themselves that were herding them all around. There's so much depth and so much more levels of this whole thing. Let me explain this real fast so we all get here on the same page. Unfortunately, there are those who lump it all together, but you have Jews, which is a religion, you have Hebrews, which is a race or an ethnic group, and you have Zionists, which is a political movement. Sammy Davis Jr. converted to Judaism, and he was a Jew, but he certainly wasn't a Hebrew, and there are Hebrews today who are good Christians, okay? So they're not Jewish, all right, and then you have Zionists and Zionist is a political movement that created, of course, the state of Israel and is absolutely hardline about whatever Israel wants. That's got to be good. Now, that's okay, but you have to understand that, because what's happened here in recent years, or actually for about past half century, is anybody who might want to dispute some of the policies of Israel gets tarred with the huge broad brush of anti-Semitism. Oh, you hate all Jews, Well, that's not necessarily true.
Well,
but it certainly kept American Jews in line and European Jews in line, because nobody wants to come out and criticize and be tarred and called an anti-Semite.
I guess I'm disputing some of those terms because of the way in which he referred to Zionist communism, and Zionist becomes sort of this attempt to be synonymous with Jewish communism.
Right, that's trying to tie the two together.
And that's what we know from communism is it was against all religions. It wasn't nobody was getting a break. Certainly,
that's right. They didn't
certainly
just
not the Jews. And so instead, I mean, he's sort of making it seem like this is like there was really the Jews were behind communism, as he mentioned Karl Marx and Trotsky. These are people that were denouncing their faith. They were renouncing their own people. They were doing. I mean, it wasn't that they were being a part of something bigger. And Zionism was hardly a part of communism in the sense that they were looking forward to starting a separate Jewish state. They had a whole other agenda under communism. I want to make that clear, because I think too often the vocabulary of white supremacism gets used, and people don't realize even quite what they're saying.
That's right. In fact, what was amazing to me to find out that actually Hitler got most of his ideas against the Jews from an American industrialist, Henry Ford,
right,
who published a book about 1920 called The International Jew, and Hitler copied liberally from that book and put it into Mein Kampf. Okay, so this was not strictly a German phenomenon, okay?
Unfortunately not.
And where they got off, in fact, Henry Ford finally pretty much outlined this. He said what he started off against was the international Jewish financiers, the people who had control and over money and therefore controlled companies and whole large large groups of people. But as one of his editors said later on, he finally just got to the point to where, I'm against all of them. And Hitler apparently went through that same progression. He started off singling out the international financiers and even named the Rothschilds in some of his early speeches. And then gradually it was like, it's the whole kit and caboodle of them, which is a terrible thing to do. That's like, if you have an uncle somewhere down the family tree and he's a murderer, then you brand your whole family as murderers. That's not right.
When we come back, we'll get our last couple of questions and comments in for Jim Marrs, author of Rule by Secrecy, next on Coast to Coast AM.
Better place for a sultry summer getaway than MGM Grand Las Vegas. Right now, during MGM Grand Value Days, you'll receive up to $500 in savings only at MGM Grand, the city of entertainment.
Cool town, meeting in the city, just so fine and looking so pretty.
Here's what you'll find this summer in the city of entertainment. 9-time Tony Award winner Tommy Tune on stage and effects. The world's most famous chefs in world-class restaurants and exotic lion habitats. MGM Grand Adventures theme park and much more. For up to $500 in savings, call MGM Grand Las Vegas at 1-800-929-1111 or visit us online at www.mgmgrand.com.
What's one of the best reasons to have fast Earthlink internet service? Well, with Earthlink, you can upload and download pictures quickly and easily. But what if you don't have any pictures you can upload? Well, Earthlink's fixed that too. Because now when you sign up for Earthlink and tell them you heard about it on Coast to Coast AM, you get a free portable digital camera. You can take pictures with a digital camera just like you do with a regular one. The difference is digital pictures upload right to your computer. So you can email them to family and friends instantly, especially when you get Earthlink. Earthlink gives you the speed you need and the outstanding service and tech support of Earthlink, named Best Internet Service Provider by both CNET and Mac Home Journal. So just call 1-800-EARTHLINK. Tell them you heard about it on Coast to Coast AM and get a free portable digital camera. Now, this offer is for a limited time, so call 1-800-EARTHLINK. That's outstanding Earthlink service and a free digital camera simply by calling 1-800-EARTHLINK. Earthlink, it's your internet. If you have some of the symptoms that 27 million men have suffered from and do suffer from because of an enlarged prostate, you can overcome that problem. Two of the major symptoms, too many trips to the bathroom and a diminished libido. Well, guess what? Dr. Michael Topliski, whom I've interviewed several times, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, is terrific and a wonderful medical doctor, has designed the Super Prostate formula for his own patients, and he's used it in his own practice for years. It contains just about every known natural ingredient, clinically proven to reduce the size of the prostate and to help stop the unnecessary trips to the bathroom once and for all. The results are amazing. It does work great with his own patients, and that's why he's making it available generally to the public. Now, here's a special offer. If you get 2 bottles of the Super Prostate formula, you get a 3rd bottle absolutely free. So you get a 3-month supply for the price of 2, guaranteed to work or your money back. You call now. You'll be glad you did. 1-800-472-5151. A small investment to help you improve your health and stop these annoying symptoms. 1-800-472-5151. That's 1-800-472-5151. Let's see who we can get in the time that we have remaining for Jim Marrs on Coast to Coast AM, and we've been discussing the occult roots of Nazism and other aspects of Hitler's meteoric rise to power, whether or not there was a secret source for this energy, and some of the subordinate issues to this. Nancy is in Cincinnati on the first-time caller line for Jim Marrs on Coast to Coast AM.
Oh, yes, real quick, Ian. I have to compliment you. You've got the sweetest voice. You're very intelligent, and you do not stutter.
Well, I'll take claim to the first 2, and you're very kind to say that.
Yes, I compliment the Coast staff, for hiring you, Mike Siegel, and everybody. You're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And Mr. Marrs, I have known quite a few. I've traveled quite a bit, and I have known quite a few people that have been in the occult. A lot of them came out of it because of the frightening supernatural things that have happened to them.
Right.
They gained wealth at different times and were very, very happy with their lifestyle and would travel and go here and there. But eventually it seemed like these supernatural forces caught up with them. And also, I wanted to know, about 20 years ago, the Illuminati, I read a book about the Illuminati Society. Now, isn't the Republican Party kind of affiliated, or people in the Republican Party affiliated with that group?
With the Illuminati?
Yes.
Again, I think we're taking a broad brush stroke there. I don't think you could say that Republicans are connected to the Illuminati, but I think you could say, and I think what you'll find if you read my book, Rule by Secrecy, that people in the upper echelon, the ruling elite, the people in the secret societies today, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trial Hour Commission, and then the inner leadership, which meets under the name Bilderbergers, I think you'll find that some of those people can be tracked back through history, through marriage, blood, associations, business, and may well be connected to Illuminati philosophies.
Right, and one more quick question. Do you feel as though the Antichrist is here, and would he be more or less associated with one of these groups?
That's a really good question, too. I have no way of absolutely knowing, but it's certainly fascinating to think about it. The one thing I've gotten out of studying about the Antichrist and the secret societies seems to be that when the Antichrist shows up, he's going to apparently be a European. So we might want to keep our eye on what's happening over in Europe.
I think we probably have time for one very quick question, a very quick answer from Rick in Joplin, Missouri for Jim Mars on Coast to Coast AM. Rick?
Hi, Jim. I was just going to comment on the same thing that the lady just asked you about the Illuminati and Trilateral Commission, but what's interesting is the Eurodollar has been approved, and that's kind of taken off slowly, it seems. You don't really hear about it as much. But this new thing that came out within the last week or two, United Nations World Court, have you heard anything about that?
Oh, well, yes, of course. And apparently there are several big meetings scheduled for later in this year. But this is really nothing new. They've been pushing this globalization or New World Order for a long time. In fact, in my book, Rule by Secrecy, I track that all the way back. That's been a game plan that's been going on apparently for centuries. But recently, where we see now where they're really making the headway, even in Europe, they're beginning to bridle a little bit at this euro dollar and under all this control. Where they're really making their headway is with these non-governmental organizations like the World Trade Organization, which was renamed from the old GATT Treaty, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And this is where decisions are being made that are usurping our sovereignty in this country. In other words, we'll pass laws, say environmental laws, it'll be overturned by the World Trade Organization because they say, well, you're hurting some other nation's trade. I think we need to start paying closer attention to what's going on because our sovereignty is slowly being stripped from us.
That's all that we have time for, Jim Marsh, but I again refer to the book Rule by Secrecy, and thank him again for making so much time for us on Coast to Coast AM, Deus Te Amat 902. My name's Punnett.